Salve and welcome to Legio 14's YouTube channel. Today we are going to look at the basic clothing, armor, equipment, and weapons of a Roman legionary from the mid to late 1st century AD. This will be a brief overview of the types of gear worn on a short patrol, guard duty, or during drill. We will start with the undergarments. A subligaculum, as it's called, was a simple loincloth and can be confirmed in a gladiatorial and slave context historically. It is a safe assumption, however, that it was used by the military as well. We move next to the undertunic. Several smaller linen tunics have been discovered which possibly could be undertunics. Although not certainly a military item, they could belong to citizens or slaves. Again, some assumption is necessary for these items as there are no specific finds related directly to the military. Moving on to tunics, we see the majority of reliefs and original finds point to a large square tunic measuring roughly forearm to forearm in width and neck to ankle in length. The primary materials used for tunics were linen and wool. Tunics were girded to just above the knee using woven belts to pull the excess fabric through. The neck knot could also be used to secure excess fabric. Open-toed boots called calagi were the primary boot worn by a soldier, and closed boots called calci were also worn. Both styles featured hobnails in the bottom. These assured good footing for the soldier. We have a video dedicated entirely to Roman boots. A link will be provided in the description, so be sure to check it out for a more in-depth look at a legionary's footwear. Socks called udones could also be worn with boots. They could be full as well as toeless. Several finds exist confirming their presence among the troops. A padded undergarment called a subermalus was worn over the tunic and underneath the armor. No original finds of the subermalus exist, so all the recreations are based entirely on the depictions of them on reliefs. There are varying styles of the subermalus, but that requires an in-depth video of its own for another time. A neck scarf called a focale was also worn by soldiers during this time. It is believed this was used to prevent chafing caused by the armor. Experience has also taught us it works well at absorbing sweat, and it provides protection or padding against the straps, such as for your canteen, Gladius, or various bags, and it also reduces the rubbing or chafing from these. Now we turn to the armor of the common soldier. There were three basic types in use during the 1st century. Segmented plate armor called lorica segmentata, mail armor called lorica hamata, and scaled armor known as lorica squamata. Of course, these are all terms coined in the modern era. Let's look first at the lorica segmentata, of which there are three variants during this time period: the Calcriza, Corbridge A, and Corbridge B. We have a video in our Ask a Legionary series called How to Put on a Lorica Segmentata, where we look at this topic in depth, so be sure to check that out. A link will be provided in the description. To put it simply, individual plates were secured together with leather straps and rivets. The armor was secured with buckles and straps as well as tie hooks. Now we look at the lorica hamata, the mail armor which consisted of thousands of iron rings riveted together to form a cuirass. This armor often featured a doubler of varying styles to reinforce the shoulders. Contrary to public opinion, this was the most popular style of armor worn by the legions, which endured for almost the entire existence of the Roman Empire in one form or another. Finally, we will look at the lorica squamata, which consisted of overlapping individual scales of bronze or iron sewn onto a linen or leather backing. This armor also often featured a shoulder doubling of various styles as well, but certainly not always. Evidence also seems to suggest it was more common amongst officers and cavalry, than it was amongst the rank and file of a legion. A military belt called a balteus was worn by all soldiers. These belts sported decorative plates and aprons, though not all did. Early on in the 1st century, styles show a double belt system was preferred, one to carry the pugio and one to carry the gladius. Toward the mid-1st century, the baldric appears to become the more common method, with just one balteus carrying the pugio. Many decorative and even elaborate original plates, studs, and buckles have been found, confirming the representation of the balteus on reliefs. The dagger carried by a Roman soldier was called a pugio. Many variations of this weapon and its scabbards existed. Notice the many different sheaths on the replicas of the originals. The pugio was predominantly worn on the left side by common soldiers. It was attached to the balteus using plates with frogs, as they are referred to. Continuing on with the soldier's kit, we'll look now at the sword called a gladius. There were 3 variants of the gladius that were common during our era, and we will look briefly at each one. All gladii were double-edged and had a sharp point. They usually were made with wooden guards and pommels, the handle being of bone or wood. Scabbards were made with wood and covered in leather, and some were edged in bronze or brass. These swords were worn on the right side by the common soldier. The Mainz gladius is most likely the oldest style of the 3. It sports a wasted blade and is also the widest. The second type is the fulum. This blade was less wide and less wasted. The original find sported an elaborately decorated scabbard. The Pompeii style was named after 4 different finds at Pompeii. This was a straight double-edged sword with a point. Overall, it was of simpler design, and the bronze linings of the scabbard do not appear on these models, for the most part. Evidence suggests this type of sword becomes the dominant style by the end of the 1st century AD. There are 3 prominent styles of helmet in the 1st century AD, as classified by H. Russell Robinson in his book, The Armour of Imperial Rome. We'll look first at the coolest helmets. These helmets were predominantly made of bronze and featured a small flat neck guard, which evolved into a larger neck guard by the century's end. The majority of coolest helmets sported a crest knob on the peak, and all of them had a protective brow guard across the front. Next, we will look at the Gallic style helmet. A high percentage of Gallic helmets were iron, although varying finds of bronze ones exist. Some of the standout features of these helmets were the embossed eyebrows, the long, wide, sloping neck guards, notched out ears with attached ear guards, and slots for detachable crests. Gallic helmets were trimmed in brass, and some even boasted highly decorative features like enamel, tinning, and stylized embossing. Finally, we'll look at the Italic style helmets. They vary drastically even within their own category. Many of the Italic helmets have a twist-on crest holder. There are a mix of finds, some iron and some bronze. Specific helmets like the Italic D are very elaborately decorated with brass decals and trimmings. There are simple versions like the Italic C, which is a basic bronze helmet. These helmets all have different types of neck guards, from very short and flat to very wide and sloping. In conclusion, there are many helmet finds, several of which don't fit into an exact category. But this video is just focusing on the basics, and for simplicity's sake, Robinson's classification is the best method we have to date. The scudum or shield of a Roman legionary was primarily a large curved shield. It was made of layers of plywood, covered in linen or rawhide. The edges were protected by rawhide or bronze edging. The hand was protected by an iron or bronze boss, or umbo as it was called. This was a soldier's primary method of defense and worked hand in hand with the gladius. The pilum was a short-range missile weapon used by the Roman soldier. It could, however, be used like a spear when necessary. It featured a triangular-shaped armor and shield-penetrating head and a long iron shaft, specifically designed to punch through shields and armor. The latter designs even featured a weight on them for added power. Be sure to check out our video dedicated to Pila. A link will be provided in the description. This concludes our video on the basic clothing, armor, weapons, and equipment of a Roman legionary. Be sure to check out our other videos we mentioned and look for future videos exploring each item in even more detail. Thank you, and we will see you in the next video.